New York City in the late 1800s was a city being born in real time. Between 1870 and 1900, its population exploded from under 1 million to over 3.5 million people, transforming it from America's largest city into one of the world's great metropolises. In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic photographs and illustrations to life, allowing us to walk through streets as they appeared during what Mark Twain called the Gilded Age, a time of staggering wealth built atop crushing poverty. This is New York Harbor in the 1880s, and it was the gateway to America. More than 70% of all immigrants entering the United States came through this water, their first glimpse of the New World, framed by the Statue of Liberty, unveiled in 1886. The harbor was never still. Steam ferries crisscrossed between Manhattan and Brooklyn. Ocean liners from Liverpool, Hamburg, and Naples arrived daily, their decks crowded with passengers clutching everything they owned. The waterfront itself was a forest of masts and smokestacks. Piers stretched out into the Hudson and East Rivers, each one a hive of activity. Longshoremen unloaded cargo, coffee from Brazil, silk from China, manufactured goods from Europe. The air smelled of salt water mixed with coal smoke, fish, and tar. In 1892, Ellis Island opened as the Federal Immigration Processing Center. Before that, immigrants had been processed at Castle Garden at the southern tip of Manhattan. This shows the Great Hall at Ellis Island, where thousands of people waited each day, having already endured weeks at sea in steerage, cramped, unsanitary conditions below deck, where disease spread easily. Inspectors examined newcomers for diseases and asked 29 questions. Most passed through in hours, but for some, America ended here. Those deemed medically unfit or likely to become public charges were sent back. Standing in that hall, you would have heard a dozen languages spoken at once: Italian, Yiddish, Polish, Greek, Hungarian. You would have seen exhaustion mixed with hope on faces that had traveled thousands of miles for this moment. Lower Manhattan was where the city's financial power concentrated. Wall Street, barely more than a quarter-mile long, had become the nerve center of American capitalism. This view shows the New York Stock Exchange in the 1880s, its trading floor a chaos of shouting brokers, paper slips, and ticker tape machines that transmitted stock prices across the country via telegraph. Fortunes were made and lost here daily. J.P. Morgan, Cornelius Vanderbilt, John D. Rockefeller, men who controlled railroads, oil, steel, and banks, shaped the American economy from offices within walking distance of each other. The concentration of wealth was staggering. By 1890, the richest 1% of Americans owned more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. This is Fifth Avenue in the 1880s, where New York's new industrial aristocracy built palaces that rivaled European royalty. The Vanderbilt family alone constructed multiple mansions along this stretch, enormous Beaux-Arts and Renaissance revival structures with marble facades, grand ballrooms, and art collections worth millions. William Vanderbilt's mansion cost $3 million to build, this when the average worker earned less than $500 a year. Inside, you would find rooms paneled in rare woods, ceilings painted by European artists, furnishings shipped from French chateaux. The parties were legendary. Mrs. Astor's annual ball set the social calendar. To be invited meant you belonged to the 400, the number of people who could fit in her ballroom, and supposedly the number who mattered in New York society. But just blocks away, a different New York existed. This shows the Lower East Side, the most densely populated place on Earth by the 1890s. Tenement buildings, hastily constructed to house the flood of immigrants, rose 5 or 6. Stories high, packed so tightly together that sunlight rarely reached the streets below. Families lived in apartments of 2 or 3 rooms with no running water, no private toilets, no ventilation. A single building might house 100 people or more. Jacob Riis, a police reporter and reformer, photographed these conditions extensively. His book, How the Other Half Lives, shocked middle-class readers who had never seen inside a tenement. The rooms were dark. Landlords avoided windows because windows required expensive maintenance. Many apartments had no windows at all. The only light came from the front room or a dim air shaft. Tuberculosis, which thrived in these conditions, was called the White Plague. It killed more people in New York than any other disease. The streets themselves were another world. This view shows Hester Street, the commercial heart of the Jewish Lower East Side. Pushcart vendors sold everything: pickles, cloth, used clothes, bread, fish. The noise was constant. Hawkers shouted in Yiddish, customers haggled over prices, children darted between carts, women did piecework at home, sewing garments for pennies. Children as young as 5 or 6 worked, selling newspapers, shining shoes, running errands. Education was not mandatory, and many families needed every dollar their children could earn. Standing on one of these streets, you would have smelled food cooking, horse manure, unwashed bodies, rotting garbage. You would have heard arguments, laughter, the clip-clop of horse hooves on cobblestones, the rattle of cartwheels. New York was more than a port and a financial center. It was an industrial city. This shows a garment factory, part of the industry that employed hundreds of thousands in the city's sweatshops. Workers, mostly immigrant women and girls, operated sewing machines in poorly ventilated rooms for 12 or 14 hours a day. The pace was brutal. Employers paid by the piece, not by the hour, so workers pushed themselves to exhaustion to earn enough to survive. Accidents were common. Safety regulations barely existed. When workers tried to organize unions, they faced blacklisting, violence, and arrest. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911 would later shock the nation, but the conditions that led to it were already in place throughout the Gilded Age. Locked doors, blocked exits, no fire escapes, women trapped in burning buildings while owners escaped. The Brooklyn Bridge, completed in 1883, was an engineering marvel. This view shows the bridge shortly after opening, the longest suspension bridge in the world, connecting Manhattan and Brooklyn for the first time. Thousands walked across it daily. Some paid a penny to take the elevated train that crossed it. The bridge became a symbol of American ambition and technical prowess. John Roebling, who designed it, died during construction. His son Washington Roebling took over, but was paralyzed by the bends, decompression sickness from working in underwater caissons. He supervised the final years of construction from his bedroom window, watching through a telescope while his wife Emily carried his instructions to the site. Transportation was being revolutionized. The elevated railways, called the Ellis, ran on tracks built above the streets. This shows 6th Avenue with the L running overhead, its steam locomotives dropping soot and cinders onto pedestrians below. The L's were fast but brutal to live near. Buildings alongside the tracks shook when trains passed. Apartments facing the L rented for less, but they opened up the city. Workers could now live in Harlem or the Bronx and commute to jobs downtown. The city began to spread northward. By 1900, plans were underway for an underground subway system that would transform New York yet again. But in the 1880s and 90s, the L was modernity in motion, loud, dirty, fast, unstoppable. Central Park, completed in the 1870s, offered escape from the crowded city. This shows the park on a Sunday afternoon, families promenading along tree-lined paths, carriages rolling down carefully designed roads. Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux designed it as a democratic space, free to everyone, rich and poor alike. In practice, social divisions persisted. Working-class families came on Sundays, their only day off. Wealthy families promenaded on the Mall, showing off their latest fashions. But for a few hours, the park offered something rare in Gilded Age New York, a shared space, carefully crafted nature in the middle of the industrial city. As darkness fell, New York transformed. Electric lighting, still new in the 1880s, began to replace gas lamps. Broadway, the entertainment district, became known as the Great White Way because of its brilliant electric signs. This shows a theater district street at night, marquees blazing, crowds gathering for evening performances. Vaudeville houses, concert halls, and theaters offered entertainment for every class. The Metropolitan Opera House opened in 1883, but there were also dance halls, beer gardens, and saloons where working-class New Yorkers spent their evenings. In Five Points and the Bowery, rougher establishments operated: gambling houses, brothels, dive bars where violence erupted regularly. Reformers worried about moral decay. Police tried to enforce closing times and liquor laws, but New York's nightlife was too large, too varied, too profitable to control. The city worked in shifts, and there was always somewhere open, always something happening. Behind the scenes, politics ran on a different set of rules. Tammany Hall, the democratic political machine, controlled city government through a system of patronage and graft. This shows a Tammany Hall meeting, smoke-filled back rooms where deals were made, jobs traded, and loyalty rewarded. Boss Tweed had been exposed and imprisoned in the 1870s, but the system he built survived. Tammany provided services, jobs for immigrants, coal for widows, help navigating the bureaucracy. In return, they delivered votes. Millions of dollars disappeared through inflated contracts, phantom employees, and outright theft. But for new immigrants with no other connections, Tammany was often their first contact with American politics. In March 1888, a massive blizzard paralyzed the city. This scene shows New York streets buried under snowdrifts 15 to 20 feet high. The elevated railways stopped, telegraph lines collapsed. The city, so proud of its modern infrastructure, was brought to its knees by nature. 400 people died, thousands were stranded, but the disaster spurred change. The blizzard convinced city planners to move infrastructure underground, power lines, telegraph cables, and eventually the subway. Catastrophe became catalyst for modernization. Standing here, looking back at these images, it's striking how many of the tensions we recognize today were forged in Gilded Age New York. Inequality on a scale that shocked even contemporaries. Waves of immigration reshaping the city's culture and identity. Technological change transforming how people lived and worked. Corruption in government. Struggles for labor rights. Debates over who the city belonged to and who it served. New York in 1900 stood at a threshold. The 20th century would bring the subway, skyscrapers, and a further explosion of growth. But the foundation was laid here in these decades of unprecedented change when America's greatest city was inventing itself in real time. These photographs offer us a window into that moment when the future was arriving, but the past had not yet disappeared. If there's another city, another era, or another moment in history you'd like to see brought back to life, let me know in the comments. I'd love to continue exploring the past with you. Thank you for watching.